What's up, Dan?
What's up, Ty?
Haven't talked to you in a while. I'm kidding. Just like on mic, I haven't talked to you in a while, I guess. And it's different to talk on mic than not on mic.
Because we have to be the best version of ourselves on mic.
Exactly. And we've not been the best version of ourselves in the last 2 years.
But we also haven't been the worst version of ourselves in the last 2 years.
No, not at all. Anyways, we're going to talk about Fargo Season 5, Episode 1, The Tragedy of the Commons, and Fargo Season 5, Episode 2, Trials and Tribulations. Yeah. Then maybe the music starts now or something, and then... Okay, cool. Yeah. Again, love talking about Fargo with you. I still wanted to do it, even though we don't really have a podcast anymore or anything. But I think it's still important to talk about Fargo, not for anyone else besides us two.
I agree. I kind of want to start big picture before we even discuss how we feel about this episode or these two episodes. And I just want to kind of marvel at the fact that, like, here we are talking about the 5th season of a TV show that's based off of a movie that had basically zero prospects for any sort of sequel, because it doesn't set up for a sequel. It's such a grounded, simple story. There's almost no reason that we should be talking about season 5 of Fargo, but the fact that it exists is kind of amazing. And you know, I guess we can kind of just jump into it. I love this season, like, so far. I love these first 2 episodes. I think we were higher probably on season 4 than most of the critics were, but still, season 4 was this big sort of expansion into what Fargo could possibly become, like, outside of the original formula. This season very much feels like a reaction to the reaction to that, because it feels like now back to sort of season 1, almost like a soft reboot of the soft reboot of Fargo, because these first 2 episodes at least are very much like it's like an inversion of the movie, where, you know, you have this kidnapping set up, but then they sort of invert that in a way and then play off of that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, the most interesting part I found about this season so far is the inversions they're doing. While it is, you know, season 1 is very similar to the movie, but season 5 is taking our expectations and inverting them in a really interesting way. Again, with like the kidnapping plot, with the hitmen, the police enforcement this season, it's all like the same, but it is very different. And season 4, as well as season 2, I guess, are just very different, which is interesting. While season 5 is, I think, a great subversion, but also is pretty much classic Fargo. But yeah, similar to you, I love this season so far. I'm happy with the simplicity, which is funny to say for like an ensemble cast of maybe like 7 characters. But I felt like last season, and we discussed this a lot, had maybe 15 characters or something like that. This season, it's kind of back to basics. The first episode almost solely focuses on Dot, Juno Temple, who, again, we talked about this very briefly before. You're like, I don't get it. And I'm like, I haven't really watched the trailer, so I don't know. But watching her in context is really amazing. And I'm sure we'll get into this as we talk. But she's basically an adult version of Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Which was something I wasn't expecting and is very exciting, I think.
Super funny. And also, you know, like Home Alone, I don't know where exactly Home Alone takes place, but it might as well be like Chicago or somewhere on the East Coast, you know, sure. Maybe Midwestern. There's a fair amount of similarity between Home Alone and Fargo when you kind of get down to it, which is pretty funny. I think Juno Temple is really fantastic. Like we were talking about, like I've never really understood Juno Temple like as an actor, really. Like I thought she was very funny in Ted Lasso. And
never
whenever
seen.
she pops up, yeah, it's Ted Lasso's fine. It's not Fargo. But Juno Temple is like really pitch perfect in this show in a way that, I think Ewan McGregor was great in season 3 of Fargo, but there was always something that was sort of strange about Ewan McGregor being in Fargo. There was some sort of disconnect that I just personally had. It's not just because he's like Obi-Wan or he's played all these big characters, but like something about him, his performance style, it was always a little bit strange. It was sort of, it felt like taking the star actor and putting him into Fargo rather than what the Juno Temple situation is, where she's not like a star by any stretch of the imagination. You know, she's not necessarily a household name to those who haven't seen Ted Lasso or a few of the movies she's been in. But that's why it's so perfect, is I don't know that much about her, and she can kind of sink her teeth into just this very seemingly ordinary person and then reveal herself to you as the episode goes along, which is really fun. And I think she's just doing a bang up job.
Yeah, because again, people probably compare her character to Peggy a lot. I feel like Peggy was someone with high ambitions that never reached those potentials, really. But it seems like Dot has been through a lot. And it's exciting to see, you know, the classic Fargo, you know, typical character, but who is way more prepared. You know, she is the Lester this season. She is like the Peggy and Ed this season, or like the Ewan McGregor, but she's prepared, which is like kind of a fun inversion of the traditional Fargo trope. And I'm very excited to see where her character goes. And again, I was interested to see, it was very cool to see them not give it all away in the first episode. You just kind of discover it as other characters like Lamorne Morse also figures it out, the cop character this season.
And within that, going back to sort of what the simplicity that you brought up a minute ago, I love the way that we enter into this season. It's so, the first like 10 minutes or so, I dare to say, are almost boring if you're not like fully invested, you know, because it's so just straightforward and things are just moving, you know, with the exception of sort of the almost farcical opening, the big like music, slow motion fist fight that's occurring in like this PTA meeting or whatever. But the way that like the characters are all introduced feels incredibly natural. It doesn't feel like we're bouncing back and forth, say in the beginning of season 2, for example, which worked very well because we love season 2, but you're bouncing back and forth and you're being introduced to all of these different components and they're all, you know, are going to be integrated at some point. This is just very straightforward. You jump straight in on the action, the immediate inciting incident. You meet one of the cop characters and just the way that she's introduced is so just matter of fact. She could just be, you know, a bit part for that one scene. The way that she's introduced, but then she comes back and she is going to become a pretty significant character in the season. The same with like Lamorne Morris later in the episode. The way that everyone sort of just gets dropped in is very natural and just very responsive to the plotting, which I think is really something that jumped out to me because of the complicated nature of season 4, especially where there's so much going on. It's nice to be able to just sort of slowly walk into this episode, and it especially makes the moment where the burglars come in really terrifying because everything has been so ordinary and so normal. She's obviously nervous because she gets arrested and you intuit that there's some sort of past there, but she's just watching TV and on the couch, and then all of a sudden the camera moves from the TV over to the door, the glass door, and then someone with a mask on walks over and it's in a kilt, and it's terrifying. Absolutely scary. And the sequence that then ensues is dual parts like incredibly thrilling television and then also incredibly hilarious Fargo television when it sort of blows up literally in one of their faces.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also very interesting to note right before that scene, I feel like they were building up Wayne Lyon's family a lot, like a very conservative, kind of Trumpian type of family who has, you know, machine guns on their Christmas card kind of vibes. And you think it's related to them somehow because it's like the whole conflict of the episode so far is Dot is arrested and that shouldn't happen in a family like this. So you think it's, you know, maybe it's Dave Foley, Danish Graves, maybe it's someone like that. Especially, there's a weird subversion there because it's eventually revealed as Old Munch, who's the guy in the kilt. But his bag over his head only has one eye hole. So you're like, oh, is that the only character with one eye this season, Danish Graves, played by Dave Foley. But it's not. It's some other. It's some other conflict that's going to affect Dot as the season goes along. And I just thought that was interesting. And it was just a really fun sequence. The ball of yarn was funny, where they were like following the ball of yarn, and then like the hairspray, the ice skate, reference to Steve Buscemi in the original movie there with the paper towel to the face. But yeah, and again, I put in my notes just very Home Alone vibes with this whole sequence, and it was a lot of fun again to see a subversion of this typical Fargo main character, but they're very prepared, and I think Old Munch says it in the in the second episode, but what does he say about her? I don't know. He's just like very scared of her. It's like she's like a tiger or something like that.
And again, like you were saying earlier, it's a fun inversion, especially because like whatever happened in her past is its own sort of Fargo season. And so very rarely do we get a main character who is like this deep down their path, like their Fargo path, if that makes sense. If we started season one after like the time skip for Lester, where he's like already had this encounter with Billy Bob Thornton. He's already gotten away from this whole situation. And then Billy Bob comes back in and terrorizes his life. This past that she has, which we only get sort of a dream memory glimpse of, which is, John Hamm at the end of a table outside and him on a horseback and just like some very simple imagery. It obviously, what this is going to be about. This is going to be about, a man being incredibly possessive over a woman. And that started to make me think obviously about like Jessica Jones and sort of the structure of that show, which is really good. And so I love that she is obviously like capable, but I also, more than just capability, it's like I like that we get to follow along and learn about her past after it's like long been gone, like that this past is going to come back and terrorize her in a way, and that we get to learn about that. I like starting sort of in the middle point of her life rather than earlier.
Yeah, and all good stories start in the middle. There's no reason to start, but like you're right, like it is if we picked up with Lester when we first met Lester, just after he's killed his wife, after he's escaped Lorne Malvo, all this stuff, and it's really great. Just like because we're having a shorter discussions this season. I just want to say a couple things near the end of the episode. Toilet death. The whole sequence in the gas station is incredible.
Riveting.
They have a great toilet death with that hitman. The air horn death. The air horn death is very funny. Where Whit Farr, played by Lamorne Morris, is like, "You got any like weapons back there, like shotguns or blah 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 blah?" And he's like, "I got an air horn." And then like the punchline of that is just he hits the air horn, and then Old Munch, just without any sense of being scared, just shoots him to death. I think those deaths are, put together are equivalent maybe to the air conditioning death in season 3. And yeah, it's a nice moment at the end. And I think the episode could have ended here. When Lamorne Morris gets up and he's going to meet with her, and you think she's going to be there with all the cops, and then she makes the choice to leave. Like, that is a very interesting choice for that character at this time. And again, with the conflict in this first episode so far, you might think it's because she doesn't want to be a part of this family that she's found herself upon. But as we get to the second episode, it's clear that there are other reasons.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the second episode. I think it's smart to wait on the introduction to the John Hamm character and that whole backstory, waiting on that until the second episode, because it allows you just all of that breathing room in that first episode and the sort of narrative focus to just follow along with Dot as she's going on this insane adventure. And it makes the gas station sequence incredibly tense. It makes the home burglary sequence incredibly tense. And so the second episode, you sort of get to enjoy the John Hamm show, and you get to enjoy a lot of the backstory there. And I'm a sucker for a monologue. I could totally get anybody saying like this is a bit expository when he gets to go off, but like I just love a monologue, especially when it's written by a really talented generational TV writer like Noah Hawley. But the second episode is really strong as well, because this is sort of where like Fargo becomes Noah Hawley Fargo, because his conception of Fargo is a sort of American story. And so every season is an opportunity for him to look at something that is, I don't know, troubling him or specifically, or just more broadly the nation at large. And this sort of like Joe Arpaio, like I think John Hamm described him as like Joe Arpaio Tiger King combo. This sort of like figure and the power that he has on like a local sort of policing level is a really interesting thing for me, because obviously there's so many different hot button issues, and I like that Noah's focus with this season is quote unquote small in that way. It's a local sheriff and like the power that he has, and specifically the power that he has over a woman. And again, just that sort of tightness, that narrative focus really engages me in like a different way than season 4 would have. But so what did you think of the second episode overall? Yeah,
I mean, like you were saying, we are huge John Hamm fans, and we love John Hamm, and he is so far really great in this season. And this is kind of the John Hamm show for most of the first episode. And again, I like how they weren't messing around with it. Like, they like built up to this big reveal that like Dot and him were like married, or still are currently married. I like how he just like went out and said like, she's my wife. Like, and you even see Joe Curry playing Gator Tillman be like, don't tell him that. Like, it's sort of like the audience circuit of like being like, don't reveal everything already. But yeah, this was it was a great second episode. I think unlike the first 2 episodes of season 4, and we're comparing it a lot, but these are the 2 seasons we've talked about, and we'll talk about to death. But yeah, the first 2 episodes of season 4 felt very long. To contrast that, these 2 kind of felt like 2 halves of like the same episode in a weird way. Like, you focus on Dot heavily in the first episode, and then Roy heavily in the second episode. And then you kind of understand where this season's going and where all the tropes are going to be going and stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought all the Tillman stuff was super interesting. I love where old Munch is going to be headed. The hitman who's kind of like a mixture of like pretty much every hitman in Fargo, and even in like Coen Brothers history, he gives me some Anton Chigurh vibes for sure. And of course, he has an awful haircut. But I think the second episode, while the first episode did a good job of setting up the main character, I think the second episode does a great job of setting up kind of the rest of the cast and where this season could be going. And it's going to be an exciting place, I think, because everyone's kind of going after Dot. And afterwards, I kind of rewatched the trailer and I was like, okay, I can see where this season's going now. Like, I think I watched the trailer once, so I didn't really have any big opinions on it. But also, John Hamm has nipple piercings, and I thought that was very, very funny.
I was looking at that also because like his whole character, the way that he presents is like basic. To make something as basic and illogical as sexism seem logical is like an interesting sort of character trait for him. He's trying to sort of out logic people with this idea that like a man and a wife are bound together. And you kind of see a similarity with the Jennifer Jason Leigh character as well. She has a similar sort of moral code, and it's this sort of puritanical Midwestern Minnesota, North Dakotan sort of code, but it's taken into this like very structured, rule oriented, like God-fearing mentality that John Hamm's character has, and he sort of has infected like Joe Keery and everyone else that's in his little commune with this sort of idea, and the idea that he decide what is right and wrong, not what's lawful or legal or illegal, is really fun. And like he gets to just sit in a hot tub with his nipple piercings and like explain that to these two Fargo officials.
Yeah, and he says, if a man is pure, his actions are only pure, which I found kind of like a summary of his kind of character. And again, a full narcissist for sure, which is very exciting to see John Hamm play, I think.
And I think something that's great about, just in talking about casting really quick, like I was saying, Juno Temple like can completely dissolve into this character because you don't have too many associations with her. John Hamm, you have a bunch of association with. He's right. Don Draper for years. He has like always been sort of this like bigger than life character, very strong, powerful presence, and he's played good and bad in varying degrees. But at the end of the day, I always look at him and I always think of him as more of like a Superman-esque kind of character, like somebody that is like a good guy, a simple, nice, kind person, and having that like layer added on top of this just insane sort of set of beliefs can make you understand why Juno Temple's character would have married him in the first place, would have been in some sort of relationship in the first place. You can see why he became the sheriff of this place. There is like this external sort of presence that he has. It's once he starts talking that you're like, oh my God, this guy's an absolute monster.
This guy's a psychopath. Yeah. But yeah, and yeah, just on Dot and him, it seemed like they had been married for like 10 years, which is a good amount of time, I guess. I'm curious to ask you this question. What role do you think the Fargo, agents are going to play in this season? Because if I remember correctly, the last time we saw Fargo was in season, like in context of like this late into the timeline, was season 1. There weren't any Fargo agents in season 3, right?
I don't think so. I mean, we might be wrong, but I don't think so.
And I think Lauren Malvo killed everyone in Fargo. Yeah. So it's interesting to see what this department is like now, like years later. And, I don't want to like bring Bokeem Woodbine back, but like, is there a world where Mike Milligan is just the main character of Fargo going forward? And he is the head department of it. And again, didn't write this in my notes or anything, but I was just kind of thinking about it because, again, it is interesting to see this new version of Fargo, which is kind of more or less a Men in Black type of agency.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good question to ask because that was the first thought I had too. Was like I'm pretty sure the last time chronologically that we saw Fargo was when everyone got mowed down. So like, how does an institution react to that, and like what do they become as a result of that? And I think ultimately I don't know what that means for the season, but what I do know is that something interesting is you have all of these different levels of policing, all of these different levels of law, basically, that are converging upon the Juno Temple character of Dot, and that's going to make for like a lot of potentially interesting red tape dynamic because you have Sheriff's Deputy Joe Keery in the same room as like a Minnesota trooper, as another trooper, and then you have the internal stuff going on with the Lyon family, and then you have the hitmen characters. So there's just a lot of different agents, and this is what Fargo does so well always, is you have all of these different agents of legality and illegality, and they're always converging on our main characters. And what I love is that it's happening so quick. It's right at the beginning, and so that kind of gives me the sense that this season is going to be more of a breakneck pace, which again is serviced by the sort of slow start to the first episode. It just walks you straight into a run,
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. And again, very, very curious what's going to happen.
I have one question for you as well.
Yeah. Go for it.
Because I think something that's really interesting is there's a potential reveal that she left about 9 years ago, and the child that she has is about X amount of years old,
Right.
And so there is an open question of, is this John Hamm's child? Or is this Wayne's child?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but that makes sense. Yeah, Scotty, right? Scotty's
Scotty.
the name of the child. Yeah, I mean, that also brings a very interesting dynamic into it, which, again, like when, I mean, she could work very fast to just like find a new life. I mean, essentially, she did a whole witness protection thing for herself. Is what Dot essentially did. And like when she has that really great conversation with Jennifer Jason Leigh too, where she's just like, don't fucking ask questions if you want to keep this, like, you know, pretty little family. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. And like, again, I think that brings, you know, John Hamm's motivation even more so. And again, I'm very, very curious where that like pits Wayne, because I guess at the end of the day, Wayne is the true Fargo character of this season, where he's just like, well, yeah, I'm just here.
I mean, down to even like he's just a sales agent, like many others that have been before him, and he just gets slapped by the attorney character, which is really funny.
Fully.
But I think to your point, it's interesting to think of how he gets brought into this, because like I'm interested in how much, or I'm interested in the question of if Dot loves Wayne, or if this was just to protect this child. You know, if this was John Hamm's child, she just needed to meet someone, get married, start a new life. If she has come to love him, if she will come to love him over the course of the season. That's a sort of psychological thing that I'm interested in exploring this season.
Yeah, because like we said, this episode, you know, first episode is kind of slow. Second episode is like her and Dot and Scotty are like making traps.
Yeah, hilarious.
For like more hitmen to come. And again, like what will that do to the marriage between Wayne and Dot is like a huge question. And also if that's not actually his daughter, you know, what else is going to go crazy this season? And again, we haven't talked about her too much, but I think Jennifer Jason Leigh is like kind of like perfect in this role. You know, it's a type of character I don't think it's a type of character that's in the Fargo movie, but I don't think we've ever seen like a rich, wealthy, like matriarch of like a very wealthy family, like in the TV show yet, because like obviously like the father in the original movie is that character, and it's essentially that character again, but I'm very curious where she's going to go, because I was expecting her to be in with like the hitmen stuff, especially with like her attorney looking having like an eye patch and shit like that. I was like, oh, maybe that's the Lauren Malvo of this season, but it's very clear he's more of a Cy Feltz, you know, than anyone else.
No, I think that's a good point, because I think, you know, obviously like Jean Smart's like the matriarch of her criminal organization family, but that's a totally different kind of thing. And whenever there's like a head of a family, like whether it's a crime syndicate or whether it's a wealthy, you know, entrepreneurial ship, it's interesting to see how the codes by which they operate. And Jennifer Jason Leigh, as we talked about moments ago, has a similar sort of puritanical idea that John Hamm has about like the relationship between a man and a woman, and like Juno Temple's character entered into this relationship, and so she has to be like rock solid with him, and like if you mess with that, then like we're gonna threaten to drop him from the trust. And
right,
so I'm curious to see to what lengths she goes to make sure that she and her family is taken care of, and ultimately like what she cares about, because she is sort of just like mommy money bucks, you know. She just like she's just super wealthy, weird, probably conservative woman who is very like non-affected emotionally by anything, just very like matter of fact. Has like a, you know, rude comment about Scotty, about the cross-dresser sits over here in the first episode. So she's just, I'm interested in what she believes and why she needs to protect herself, and if she's protecting herself or if she's protecting her son, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of love there.
No, definitely not. And I think they'll be kind of obviously the most interesting stuff is going to be between like Roy and Dot. But I definitely think their subplots are going to be really interesting. And I'm excited to see, again, after the first episode, I was like, I don't know how all of this is going to come together. But at the end of the second episode, I'm like, okay, here we are. And again, I will say to criticize one thing about this episode, I thought the scene with all three, I will say like these are like the three types of cops. Like this season, like Lamorne Morris, Olmstead, and Gator all in the hospital room. I felt like Joe Keery, Gator, deleting that image was like too easy of like a oh, I guess Lamorne Morris is never going to see Dot, until like halfway through the season or whatever. So I will say I'm hoping like they kind of resolve this thing. And it looks like there's a scene in the trailer where Lamorne Morris is like, no, I saw you. That was you. And Dot's like, man, it's not me. It couldn't be me. And everyone's like, no, it was you. And it's kind of like the stinger of the trailer. But I would like that to be in next episode just because, we always talk about the mark of a good TV show is writing your characters into corners and then writing them out in an interesting way. I think Barry did that really well until it didn't, until the last season sucked. And that's my hot take of this pod, is that Barry season 4 sucks. But I think Fargo always does a really good job of like writing their characters into a tough spot and then writing them out. I felt that scene was kind of like a little too easy, and it made up for it with the next Gator scene, or the couple Gator scenes after, where he is getting hunted down by old Munch, basically. And I'm really looking forward to that subplot. But yeah, I guess like just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was like very silly, the deleting of the photo. And it ultimately just sort of delays things a little bit. But to your point, I hope that the speed of the show matches sort of where it's been. Or I should rephrase that. I hope that it continues to build in the best way that like Fargo does in the back half of seasons. I hope that sort of is just the pace of the whole season, because like you said, getting them to the corner is really fun, but it's much more fun when you get them out of the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Like a perfect example is, we've talked about this a lot, like Mike Milligan when he kills what's his name when he kills like the Undertaker, right? That's the name of the character. When he kills the Undertaker and you're like, holy shit, like what's he gonna do now? And they write him out like very well. Like stuff like that I'm excited to see this season, and that's the stuff in the back half of the season that's really good. And I think the stuff that was kind of missing in season 4.
I agree. Yeah. And again, sort of like going back to an earlier point, this sort of like reset of Fargo and bringing it back to this like very simple sort of narrative focus that is an inversion of the movie in the first season, allows for the simplicity of storytelling to get you into and out of those sort of corners in smart, creative ways. Whereas like a season 4, because it's so complicated and because like so much stuff is happening, and when you have that much stuff going on, you expect the absolute like most brilliant way out of a corner. So when a character like slips, falls, and shoots himself, it feels like it's funny.
Not naming any names. Any character.
It's very funny. Yeah, it's very funny, and it's very Fargo, but it's also like, that's how we're getting out of this corner, as opposed to this season where like it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, the direction is clear, and so the way out of a certain corner is going to just be like Juno Temple being feral and like just gnawing on ankles, like she just has to get pushed to her absolute breaking point in order to get out of this situation, which I think is good. And it's it's simple, but it's also just like so masterfully and easily done by Noah Hawley.
Yeah, exactly. And it was very exciting to see he directed these first 2 episodes and wrote them, which I'm pretty sure he does every season, but like, I feel like you never know sometimes, because like as things get older and like, Noah Hawley got offered Doom a while ago, like a Doctor Doom movie or whatever that never saw the light of day. But like, when he's getting a lot of stuff, it's like, oh, is he ever going to come back to Fargo? And it's nice to see that he does. And honestly, like, this could be the last, like, I guess the last thing I want to talk about is, like, could this be the last season? Because I think this very much well could be, because if you look at it from just a structural perspective, like 5-act structure, and they're like 5 different stories, and it's like, how much can you really do after 5 seasons, in my opinion? And they did the classic thing. And again, I think you and I could have predicted this, and I think in our pitches we did predict this, that it would take place in like 2019, because season 1 takes place in like 2010 era, season 2 takes place in the 70s, season 3 takes place in like 2017, I want to say, and then season 4 goes back in time again to like the 50s, right? 40s, 50s. Mm-hmm. And then this season takes place in 2019. So it's like, they go basically as close as present as you can. Then they go like back in time, close as present as you can, back in time, back to like close to present. Which is, interesting and cool. And like, again, do I want to see like an 1800s Fargo? Probably not, but actually maybe I do too.
Yeah, I think, it's an open question, because I think after season 4 we were both just like, I don't know. I think they drove this thing as far as they can go, like they tried to expand this outward beyond like what we expected Fargo to be, and it kind of hit in big ways and also missed in big ways. And I think a lot of people weren't crazy about that season. So to me it felt like, oh, well, it's probably, that's the end of Fargo, just not because like they can't do more stuff, but just because like that's as far as they could go. But then coming back to basics, I don't know, they probably could just continue to do this and do these sort of allegories for these greater American issues for as long as Noah Hawley is interested. It does definitely feel like the place that he can come back to very intelligently, but also in a very funny way, express a lot of these different ideas. Because in other shows, these like bigger, broader ideas, these Trumpian characters, or like the concepts of like legality and illegality within policing, in other shows that stuff comes off really heavy-handed. In Fargo, it's like quite funny and quite profound usually. So I don't know, it's definitely something that he could keep running back as long as he wanted. And like, I don't care if it's back to basics or if it's like, founding of America, like settlers coming to Minnesota. It could be anything. The very first
settlers.
Yeah.
Wow, that'd be very funny. And then by the end they all get their accents. That's the end of that season. But yeah, and on your point about the Trumpian characters, I feel like it's never, and I think in a lot of popular media, it's like very easy for like, more liberal writers to be like, oh, this guy is just a bad guy. But I think what Noah Hawley does beautifully is that, like, yes, this is a Trumpian type figure, but he has layers to him, and he's not like, no one is just that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's a very like subtle way that he does it, and it's a very real way. And I'm excited to see where, again, most of this cast is like a Trumpian figure, so are filled with Trumpian figures. So I'm excited to see where it goes. And again, I was very pleasantly surprised with these 2 episodes, in the sense that I'm like, oh, yeah, we're back.
We're definitely back. It was comforting, but not in a way that felt nostalgic, in a way that felt like, it's just nice to watch great television. So I agree. Super excited about the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And
any last thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just my last question for you is, do you think that there will be any sort of supernatural elements that come into play this season again?
That's a great question. We really went off last season. Rest in peace, Zombie Man.
Rest in peace, Zombie Man. You were a real one.
Whoever that guy was, yeah. Devil Watch. I will say, it's like all stuff I forgot.
Yeah, and we're just remembering it right now. Yeah.
And we're just remembering it. Shit. I think similar to season one, it's just kind of going to be, I think God is going to play a big role in this season, as it does usually in a Fargo season. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be as blatant as season 4. There was literally we joke, but there was literally just a zombie man in a few episodes that represented death or something. I'll re-listen to this podcast soon. But I think it'll be some thing of God. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a 1 episode thing, kind of in the back half of the season. Nothing too crazy. What about you? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right on. I think that there's a lot of talk about God and about what is right and wrong. And it seems and there are a lot of different figures of justice within the season. So I do think that some sort of payoff of, some sort of, whether it is just an alien spaceship that they think is God, or whether it's God, or whether it's just a freak accident, or whatever it is, fish falling from the sky, I do think that there will have to be a come to Jesus moment for these characters, and this larger idea of what justice is probably going to have a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and I guess one more question.
Yeah.
Is there going to be an It's Always Sunny cast member this season?
Good question. I don't know if anyone's been officially announced, so it'd probably just be a cameo, right? So
yeah, but was Rob McElhenney announced for season 3? Because he was only in 1 episode, right?
Yeah, he was only in the LA episode. But yeah, so I don't think he was announced. I guess not. So I mean, if we're just picking folks that we'd love to see,
because remember, FX is also connected with It's Always Sunny, so.
And there's definitely it's the same thing with HBO. There's just a HBO fodder, when Succession is in season 4, they're just let's pull out whoever we can,
I mean, look at our friend Edwin Lee Gibson.
Exactly. Yeah, shout out to Edwin. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, that was awesome to see him get a really cool part in season 2. Yeah, good. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, shout out to Edwin. I wonder if he's going to listen to this.
Very curious if he's going to listen to this. If so, hi, Edwin.
Hey, Edwin, what's up?
Yeah, and then, I guess if there's nothing else, I'm just very happy that Fargo's back. I look forward to discussing it with you. And again, if people are listening, I will just say that we're going to be slow this season, but we will eventually talk about it. We're both just the most busy we've ever been. Hopefully one day we'll end up talking about season 3 and season 1. But again, right now it's we're working on a lot of cool stuff in Los Angeles, California, and it takes a lot out of us, and that's it.
Yeah, while everyone else was at home with their families watching Fargo over the Thanksgiving week, we were over here in Los Angeles grinding. Grinding.
Exactly. Grinding. But love Fargo, love talking about Fargo with you. Excited for the next 8 episodes.
Yeah, me too. I'm stoked. I'm excited about it. Hopefully people listening to this are also excited. I hope the numbers are good for the season. I hope people who maybe were lost came back to the show, because it is really fun. It's a really good way of exploring these hot button issues, and it's just really good, masterful television. So I'm stoked.
Yeah. Shout out Noah Hawley.
Shout out. And we're still waiting to get put on the payroll.
We'll say anything good. We would have given season 4 great reviews if you paid us.